Good morning, everybody. Lots going on as usual. Okay, here's what's going on with this. The Premier of Nova Scotia is saying that the federal government, should run the investigation about the Nova Scotia mass shooting, and Justin Trudeau says we'll support whatever the Premier of Nova Scotia wants to do, and don't worry about it. It's all good. This is at his conference yesterday on the 22nd. And this is reported on the 21st. So on the 21st, the Premier is saying it's up to the feds. And on the 22nd, or yesterday, Friday, Justin Trudeau is saying, oh, it's up to the province. Don't worry about it. I don't think anybody's going to investigate this. Do you remember the black box, the Iranian black box from when they shot down that jet full of Canadians? But if you ask Iran, 2 Canadians were on board because they don't recognize dual citizenship. Like if you're Iranian and nothing else, right? But in Canada, you could be Iranian Canadian or Canadian Iranian, I guess, depending on where you are or whatever. But I don't think anybody's going to investigate this. I don't think anybody's going to investigate. Do you remember that virus that came out of Wuhan? Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to investigate that either. Not to anybody's satisfaction anyway. So here's everybody passing the buck. CTV News is reporting the RCMP has to explain what they didn't do. More calls for inquiry into Nova Scotia mass shooting. Premier, Stephen McNeil says it's up to Ottawa, but the Nova Scotia government is hearing more calls to launch a public inquiry into last month's mass shooting, which claimed 22 lives in the province. McNeil believes an inquiry would be a federal responsibility since the RCMP is a federal agency, but many people, including some of the victims' family members, feel the province should take care of it. Quote, firearms fall under the purview of the national government. Guns coming across the border fall under the purview of the national government, McNeil said on Thursday. I said they need to be the lead agency. Halifax privacy lawyer David Fraser said there's no reason why Nova Scotia can't handle an inquiry on its own, pointing to a case on Canada's west coast. And they give an example of a taser. I've scrolled down. A former journalist and author of 3 books on the RCMP, Paul Palango, said an inquiry is necessary and would provide vital information. What? An author of 3 books? I wrote 3 books on the RCMP, and I used to be a journalist. This gives me credentials to comment on this story and be quoted as an expert or as somebody we should be listening to in this story. Isn't that weird? Doesn't that make you think they couldn't find somebody else? They couldn't find better precedent than the taser one. They couldn't find somebody else to comment on this. I just think it's a weak position. Anyway, back to this. Back to Paul Palango, so take it with a grain of salt. Quote, this seems to be the province ducking responsibility when it should actually be stepping up to the plate, said Palango. It's their problem. He believes Nova Scotians deserve answers following the killing spree. They're being ignored, he said. The RCMP has to explain what they didn't do. I'm not blaming the individual members. I think it's the system in which they were not prepared. They were not properly trained. Weird. And I have other questions of incidents and incidents that happened on that day. And well, here's a tweet that I wrote. It says, just wondering, does anyone know the identity of the 2 RCMP officers who shot up the fire hall in Nova Scotia during the mass shooting event? Are they still on duty? If so, why? Is there an investigation into their conduct? Is shooting at a building without identifying yourselves procedure? And what they did was they got out of the car, they started shooting at the building, allegedly because they saw somebody in uniform. The uniformed officer identified himself. They stopped shooting, got back in their car and left. But wasn't the mass shooter in uniform with a stolen car? So again, things that don't make any kind of sense. But we're not going to get any kind of satisfaction from an investigation. Nobody is. Nova Scotia's not. The wider Canadian audience who's interested in this is not. Here's Justin Trudeau with a question and answer that is unsatisfactory as usual.
That's my fault. I want to go to something else. Last week, the Premier of Nova Scotia said he would wait and see whether Ottawa is willing to hold a public inquiry into the mass shooting in his province. So very simply, Prime Minister, will you commit that your government will lead an independent public inquiry into the shooting?
I think people have many questions about what happened in Nova Scotia, and we're encouraging the RCMP to do its work on the initial investigation. But as we move forward, there will, of course, be larger questions to ask, and we will work with the Government of Nova Scotia on getting those answers.
So we'll work with the government of Nova Scotia. He doesn't commit to it. It's a soft answer. It's not, yeah, we really need to know what happened there. And he's not even talking about the wayward officers who remain anonymous, who are probably still on duty. Isn't it customary to have like badge numbers released or they're on disciplinary leave or whatever? I don't think anything happened. Because I have no reason to believe that anything happened. Here is Health Minister Hadju, and she's blaming Stephen Harper's government for the lack of PPE because of the lack of funding. Those Harper governments, those conservative governments that cut, right? Cut. Yeah. Here's Miss Hadju getting caught in a lie, and quite expertly. Very, very well done. Very well done, sir. And I can't remember his name right now, so I'm not going to try and say it. But watch this. It's very interesting. Here you go. Go.
Were you a minister prior to becoming the Minister of Health? Time in the last decade that the national emergency, were you ever briefed at the federal cabinet at any time in the last decade that the national emergency strategic stockpile was not funded or mandated to amass sufficient levels of medical supplies or equipment to respond to a pandemic like COVID-19?
Well, I can't speak to the 5 years prior to our government, where, in fact, under the Harper Conservatives, the agencies experienced significant cuts. But I can tell you that during the 5 years that we were in government, in fact, we increased funding to Public Health Agency of Canada. In 2014-15, the funding was $637 million. We increased that funding by 6%. In 2018-19, PHAC's funding was $675.4 million.
Minister, I just want to start with your comment about blaming the Harper Conservatives. First of all, I want to say how disappointed I am that instead of dealing with this very important situation, that you use that disgraceful fallback line. I have the public accounts with me because I keep them everywhere I go. And in fact, since the Liberal government came into power, the first year in power, you cut PHAC funding 10%, then 13%, overall drop of 5%. Public or health ministry in total was slashed 12% since the Harper years. So I would ask that you would actually focus on providing true answers to this committee about this pandemic rather than falling back on disgraceful Liberal talking points about Harper cuts.
And this government loves to distract like that, right? Like they love to, when called out, they say, "Oh, those people did horrible things and we fixed it." But the response to this has been awful and very expensive, very expensive. And now these are the same people, the people who do not accept responsibility for their failings, do not even admit responsibility, but blame Stephen Harper. They want to have you install an app that they've created so that they can track you. And yesterday I outlined, and I appreciate everybody telling me Amazing Polly has already done contact tracing. She saw this coming. And yeah, she's been talking about getting rid of cell phones for a while. I looked at flip phones last night on eBay. They are cheap. I think there's going to be a big market for them very, very soon. I looked at a Razor. Looked all right. Anyway, so I think that it's very interesting, the sudden mainstream of this, right? People want to feel like we're doing something to be safe, right? And safety just doesn't exist, right? Like safety is false. It's false. It doesn't exist. And I'll show you, like, even if you stay in your house, they don't even know. People are getting COVID-19 by community transmission, but Ontario knows little about how. They have no idea where it's coming from. And that's true right up until 3 days ago, right? This is from 3 days ago. This is from May 8th. This is from April 28th, 29th. It's crazy. And they're saying, don't worry about it. We'll lie about what the government's spending. We'll lie about what the government cut, the previous government cut, and how we spent it. And we'll throw people under the bus at whatever rate necessary to maintain this facade, maintain this narrative. And they want to strongly recommend you install a contact tracing app. And they're not going to answer questions about it. Answer questions? Finance minister answer questions about numbers? No, not in Canada. No. They just sling insults back and forth and call you racist to the press, right? That's how governance is done, right? In our banana republic of Canada, right? Welcome to Canada, everybody. 2020. My hair's a little longer than I expected in 2020. CTV News is reporting feds will soon strongly recommend contact tracing app. This is terrifying. This is really scary. Back to this. Responding to the need to increase the capacity to trace any possible contacts of confirmed COVID-19 cases, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the federal government will soon be strongly recommending Canadians download a to-be-determined monitoring and exposure notification app. Now, I want to see how much strongly recommending, what kind of levers can they bring to bear? Will they withhold your tax refund? Will they withhold your ability to go to work? Will they say you've been exposed? Oh my goodness, it is so coincidental that we'll call you if you don't install the app. And if you don't install the app, you can't go to work because you're not part of our system, right? Just like somebody who would be sick, right? You're excluded from the system. If you don't get pushed into the system, then you can't be part of the wider society because we're all healthy and you're not, because you don't have this app on your phone. So if you don't have your phone with you, you can't come into the store. Apparently there's thermal imaging in the United Kingdom as well. I tweeted that this morning. But this is what the slippery slope we're on is leading towards very quickly. Like if you talk about things that they don't want you to talk about, maybe you're also exposed. Maybe that's quite convenient, right? It's scary. And I mean, it's not like there isn't precedent for this in history. It's not like there isn't precedent for this in modern history, like post 1970s, right? Post 1950s. Mao China, right? Come on. Anyway, doesn't matter. Regardless, there are many examples of government overreach to track you and to silence political opponents, and getting the press to do the work for you as well. I mean, it's very scary, but this is next level stuff. This is very, very intrusive. Okay, back to this. Canadians download. Okay. In the meantime, federal employees are ready to make thousands of contact tracing calls a day, 7 days a week. During his Friday morning address outlining the latest federal pandemic measures, Trudeau said the federal government has trained federal employees who can make 3,600 contact tracing calls a day. And in addition, Statistics Canada has trained another 1,700 interviewers who can make up to 20,000 calls a day. The federal government is offering this help to all the provinces and territories to triage any backlogs or surges in demand for contact tracing. Trudeau said they're already helping Ontario and are ready to make calls for other jurisdictions at any time. We need to accelerate our ability to do contact tracing. After we've confirmed and isolated new cases, we have to get in touch with everyone who may have been exposed to the virus and make sure they take measures to quarantine and monitor themselves for symptoms or get tested, Trudeau said. The Prime Minister said that increased contact tracing is just one of the key benchmarks needed to be met in order to reopen safely. Testing capacity needs to be scaled up to quickly isolate new cases, so work is underway to procure reagents and swabs, and data collected needs to be quickly shared across provincial and territorial borders. Okay, so I said yesterday we have like 135 cases in Guelph, and a lot of that is in long-term care facilities. A lot of places, a lot of cities like Guelph are relatively contained. So how does this fit into the lockdown that we're currently under? How does this fit into the 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 2 weeks to make the virus die, and then 2 months later we're still sitting waiting with no real, like, we're going to open and everything's going to go back to normal in this period of time. Now we're talking about, to be safe, we have to have a full cure. I don't think China has a full cure, and I don't think all of China got locked down. Why is all of Canada locked down? Right? Like, all of these things seem really, really suspect. It seems like the logic they use for one scenario doesn't get played out across all scenarios, right? If you're on an airplane and you've got a mask on, but you're allowed, and you have to wear the mask to board the plane, you have to wear the mask the whole time while you're on the plane, but you don't have to wear the mask if you're eating, because that's crazy. But does the virus go, oh, you're eating? Okay. I'll just wait here, and then when you're done eating, and then you've put your mask back on, then I'll go back to being a virus, okay? We've agreed. Handshake, right? That was weird. But still, it seems, it defies logic, right? It doesn't make any sense. And so, like, to say, and here's the logic flip I'm going to show you now, right? So they're saying that this definitely is going to work. The number, this is a 14-day, we're going to, This is a 14-day incubation period. The number of people that you may come into contact with in a city in 14 days is a lot of people. Imagine you go to a YMCA or a grocery store or a Walmart or anywhere really that people go, right? You could be in contact with 100 people. Now, pretend that you're like a Walmart worker. That's even more because you're always at the Walmart and tons of people come through, right? So extrapolate. It is impossible to have an army of people do contact tracing properly. And pretending that we can do this and pretending that an app is going to fill the gap. I illustrated yesterday in the contact tracing video that contact tracing has to be done by trained professionals. It cannot be replaced by an app. And they were saying that it could be augmented by an app. But I don't want the government to be able to send me an app that is that needs to be installed on my phone, and then if I get this notification, I just have to stay home for 2 weeks, no questions asked. And if I don't stay home for 2 weeks, I'm gonna have the black mark on my phone, right? If I try and go somewhere, it'll be like, oh, show me your phone that you're allowed to go out and you're not part of the contact tracing, and you won't have this fine for playing at the park. And then I say, well, I don't have a phone. I have a flip phone. And then they say, oh, well, here's your fine for having a flip phone, sir, right? I do have a phone. I don't have a flip phone. I wasn't listening to Amazing Polly when she gave me the early warning. And I believe her. But you either act that way or you don't, right? And so I still have a regular cell phone. So what's that? I don't know. Anyway, carrying on. To recommend an app soon in order for people to move around freely. And they use quotes. I thought this was like it's right in your face. To move around freely. If you want to move around freely, join the game, right? Join the game. Man, the ability to pinpoint and quarantine new cases is required, said the Prime Minister, explaining that the federal government is looking into various applications to help the government monitor virus spread. Trudeau said the government is currently working with a number of different partners on potential contact tracing and exposure notification applications, and that in the coming weeks, Ottawa intends to recommend strongly to Canadians a particular app that will help us manage the spread of COVID-19. Tools to aid in this have already been implemented in other countries, including South Korea and Australia. Trudeau said one of the challenges with the app so far, I think that it's interesting, they use other countries to say, don't worry, everybody, this is fine, other countries have done this. They don't talk about how much success or anyway, I think it's funny. Like, don't worry. We don't even have to tell you that it worked in other countries, just that other countries did it. Don't worry, everybody. Other countries have apps too. Trudeau said one of the challenges with the app so far is that the app has to be open on your phone to work, draining battery. He said Canada is working with Apple and Google on fixes expected in June to address this. Yes, they're talking about just lumping it in with the operating system, turn off automatic updates. However, or just get a flip phone. Listen to Amazing Polly. Right? However, serious privacy concerns remain about using cell phone apps to monitor Canadians. Earlier this month, federal, provincial, and territorial privacy commissioners issued a statement calling for government to ensure that any application being developed or recommended respect Canadian privacy laws. Among these privacy watchdogs recommendations, app must be voluntary and based on user consent. Okay, now, what kind of stick can they bring to bear, right? What can they take away if you don't consent, right? If you don't consent, do they get to take away your ability to go to work? Do they get to take away your ability to participate in going to the park or going to Walmart or whatever? Or do you have to freely consent, right? Or can they use withholding your taxes? Oh, wouldn't it be great to give you your taxes back? But you didn't install the app, so there's a surcharge for that. And in fact, you owe us $300. $300 is not enough. $1,000. $1,000 is not enough. $10,000. Yeah, who's to say? Who's governing this, right? Clearly, people who want us to do it by any means necessary. And they are willing to throw anybody under the bus, to lie about what they've done, to lie about their intentions, to get it done. There's the proof. Okay? That's the slippery slope we're on. Really. Back to this. These are the watchdogs' recommendations. It must come with a high degree of transparency as to how the information will be used, as well as subject to independent oversight. Oh, sure, I believe that. Independent, arm's length. Yeah, just like Morneau Chappelle. Morneau Chappelle. They're arm's length, right, from the finance minister. How's those new contracts coming in, sir? It looks like a very healthy business. Back to this. The scope of the app's ability to monitor users' behavior and location must be science-based. What? Science is wonderful. Apparently, it is indisputable. 97% of scientists agree, so you cannot dispute that fact. That is a fact. Everybody agrees about it. It's a fact. You cannot dispute it, right? Science-based. Welcome to Science 2020. That the program is as minimally intrusive as possible, proportion to the public health necessity. Well, do you spare any expense when you're talking about the health of our children? One life, if we can save one life, is that enough? Right? Like the rhetoric just writes itself. The data collected is de-identified and aggregated as much as possible. What does that mean, as much as possible? Please de-aggregate the, first initial of the first name and the middle letter of the last name. Like, that the app come with time limit measures that see any personal information collected destroyed when the crisis ends. Do you guys remember the Patriot Act? That was a crisis-initiated thing. Did they roll that back yet? Is that crisis still in play? This is terrifying. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And these people do not know enough about this thing. It seems like they're following a script. Everything they've recommended is wrong. Everyone they've blamed is anybody but themselves. And they want to do contact tracing. And yet, on April 29th, the headline reads, "People are getting COVID-19 by community transmission, but Ontario knows little about how." May 8th. "Community spread of COVID-19 remains stubbornly high," Ontario's top doctor says. 3 days ago. And there's no date on this. But Google says this was published 3 days ago. I'm just going to read through here. I know. See, I told you it was going to be long. 21 minutes already. Whew. New Hamburg Independent.ca is reporting Ontario can't say where more than 2/3 of COVID-19 cases originate on any given day. We're going to look at this through a contact tracing lens. On any given day in the past month, the province hasn't been able to account for the source of exposure for more than 2/3 of reported cases of the virus. This is because the cases are due to community spread, where the source has been determined to be unknown, or they're still being investigated by public health units. I scroll down. Everyday Public Health Ontario publishes a summary that breaks down new and cumulative cases of COVID-19 into categories such as gender distribution, hospitalizations, outbreaks in long-term care homes, and deaths. The information is pulled from the province's Integrated Public Health Information System, IPHIS, which relies on local public health units to enter case data by 4 p.m. the previous day. The summary also reports the number of confirmed cases by exposure type in 4 classifications: travel, close contact of a confirmed case, community transmission, and information pending. Over the last month, the travel and close contact exposure types for which Public Health Ontario knows whether the virus was acquired through travel or exposure with people who had the disease have together averaged about 30% of the province's total cumulative cases. The remaining 2 classifications, community transmission and information pending, are problematic in that officials don't know on any given day how people in these categories were exposed to the virus. Since April 21st, these 2 categories have accounted for more than 2/3 of the province's total confirmed cases on a daily basis. For example, on May 20th, there were a total of 24,187 cumulative confirmed cases of COVID-19 reported in Ontario, according to the summary. I'm pausing here for a quick second. Think about what kind of contact tracing they're doing now for those 24,000 people. Think about how many phone calls they have to make. Think about how many people they have to be in touch with. Think about interviews and finding everybody they've been in contact with, right? So we do not have the ability to do that right now. Right now. We don't have nearly that capacity. Not from everything that if everything that I've read is true, and I have to assume that everything that I've read is at least based in some kind of truth, otherwise what am I doing? Then we don't have even near the capacity to trace even those 24,000 cases. The daily cases coming in, we couldn't even keep up with now if we put teams on them. And they've got pods and they've got people tracing these cases and whatever. I would love to see what percentage of the cases they have been able to trace effectively and how many cases they think they've prevented due to contact tracing before we jump into app territory. Right? Wouldn't you be interested? I'd be interested before we start spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to train people on how to do contact tracing. Like, this is happening right now, and they're using this emergency to justify it. And if you question it, you're an anti-vaxxer or something to that effect. It's wild. You cannot disagree with science. You cannot. Hi, Mark. Okay, of those, back to the article, of those, 1,557 were the result of exposure to the virus due to travel, 6,030 due to close contact with a confirmed case, 8,412 were the result of community transmission, i.e. we don't know where the people got it, and neither do they, and 8,188 were information pending. If they don't know and we don't know, what's the point of the contact tracing? Right? If we're getting that many community transmissions, and they're saying, okay, time to open. Again, conflicting data, conflicting actions, right? It's crazy. Back to this. In other words, cases for which the sources of the virus is unclear and for which we have incomplete information together made up 68.6% of the province's total confirmed cases that day. The definition of community transmission varies among some regions, but Dr. David Williams, Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, told the Star the province classifies it as cases where we can't be sure where they got it from and the patient is not sure. Scroll down. Williams said the goal is to ultimately find out how people got the virus. Quote, it's difficult to determine exactly where someone acquired their infection because the incubation for the virus is approximately 14 days, said Dr. Doobie. That's a good name. Toronto's Associate Medical Officer for Health. It is sometimes not possible to determine exactly what was the source for the person's infection. A breakdown provided Wednesday in an email. So again, let me put this into context. If nobody knows where 68% of the cases come from, and you get a notification one day saying you may have been exposed, you have to stay home. What does that mean in the greater context of life in Canada in the coming years? Think about that. A breakdown provided Wednesday, back to the article, in an email by Toronto Public Health listed as unknown or under investigation the source of transmission in 20% of their 8,866 cases. That's 1,773 people. It lists as community transmission only 10% of the total cases, 886. Other categories are 31% close contact, 27% institutions, 8% healthcare settings, 4% travel. In Ontario, the number of cases attributed to travel has not increased much since the early days of COVID-19 contact tracing. The other three categories have risen steadily and relatively evenly. When contact tracers assign a case to a category, they make a judgment, and that really comes into play with close contact and community transmission. Close contact is relatively easy to assign. So say a husband is confirmed case and his wife also tests positive, or an infected resident at a long-term care home passes the virus to a personal support worker. Furness said the community spread is a very long process of investigation simply to come to the conclusion that there is no connection to be found. Furness said, when you have a lot of community spread, it's a double whammy. You get a lot of cases and you're going to spend a ton of time on each case to come to the conclusion that you never knew where it came from. What's the point? What is the point? What is the point? What is the point? Here is, I think this is important. This article talks about plandemic, and they say it's debunked. I haven't heard any of the claims inside the movie debunked, but this is the we had to censor this for you. This was so dangerous, you could not make up your mind about it. Okay? CBC reporting on May 21st, how a debunked COVID-19 video kept spreading after Facebook and YouTube took it down. Although social media giants such as Facebook and YouTube have largely removed a debunked documentary about COVID-19 at the pandemic from their platforms, copies and variations of the video are still up on alternative and social media sites where hundreds of thousands of people are watching them. And links to their content keep popping up on mainstream platforms. Google Drive deleted the video from inside somebody's drive. So Google Drive belongs to Google, not you. Back to this. Plandemic is a 26-minute video originally touted as a vignette meant to be a part of a longer documentary. I'd love to see the rest of it, by the way. Full of false and misleading claims about the coronavirus, including about how people can protect themselves. Interesting, they don't talk about COVID-19. They talk about coronavirus, which is a classification of viruses. Back to this. The video flooded social media platforms in the first week of May. According to the New York Times, it was viewed more than 8 million times across major platforms. The original version has been removed from Facebook, YouTube, and Vimeo in their push to crack down on false or misleading information related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Facebook said some of the documentary claims could cause imminent harm, and YouTube cited medically unsubstantiated diagnostic advice. This is so dangerous, you cannot make up your mind. We had to protect you from it. Scary. Last couple of headlines here to finish us off for the day. Court challenge seeks to overturn federal gun ban. I just saw this a few hours ago, and man, like I'm gonna hit half an hour, very close. So I'm glad somebody's fighting back against this. I think there are a lot of loopholes. I think there are a lot of legal holes in their gun ban, and I think that there will be. I think it holds water. I think a challenge would be good to hear. That said, I think they own the courts, and I think that they'll say, "Wow, you're right. What really needs to change here is the laws to match the gun ban." That's what I think is going to happen, unfortunately. And this is funny. Liberals, conservatives, New Democrat parties claim COVID-19 federal wage subsidy to pay their workers. Doesn't it speak for itself? I don't think that that's how tax dollars should be used. I know that usually when you donate to a federal party, you get a tax receipt. I don't know. I don't really like that either. I think that the party should sustain itself. I think that the ideas and the people are what's required for federal leadership and consent, right? Like, and I think that we should have a more engaged populace. I think that people should be engaged in this. I think that people should be interested in this. I think that people should be encouraged to talk about this and have disagreements and to discuss what's going on and the failures of our leadership and how it could be better and what the problems are, because the problem is really what the media does in subverting the conversation, right? Instead of talking about the gun ban or the border or whatever, you talk about how racist it is to talk about the border, right? Racism is the real problem here. It's just wild. It's just wild. And so when you're using taxpayer dollars to fund the NGOs or to fund the opposition going to court or to fund the newspapers to print the tripe or to fund the actual party themselves, right? Like, it's all the same money. It's our money being allocated in a way that I personally disagree with. I don't think that this is how our country should be run. I don't think this is how a democracy is run. I don't think this is how a robust conversation on what the right way to move the country forward is had. I certainly think it's not had from the front door of Rideau Cottage either, right? So this is very insulting. You know, using Canadian taxpayer dollars to directly fund political parties. The parties should sustain themselves in order to have that consent to govern, right? If you're going to lead, you should at least be able to be held accountable the same way all other Canadian businesses are held accountable. And I mean, not to say that it's a Canadian business's failing if they can't make it through this unprecedented event, right? This unprecedented economic event. It's not their fault if they were in a restaurant or retail. But wouldn't you want sound fiscal managers running your political parties? I do. That was a long one today, everyone. Thanks for watching. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I'm going to have a new guest host on next week, and it's going to be lots of fun. And Frank and I are scheduled to talk this weekend, I hope. I think. We talked about that. I have a birthday party to go to today. Darn right. And, well, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. It's supposed to be very sunny and windy in Ontario. So, I do weather now, too. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.